The city was a masterpiece I owned but could never touch. From my apartment on the 34th floor, Manhattan spread out like a circuit board of impossible complexity, all glitter and hum. At night, it was a spill of fallen stars. By day, it was a living, breathing thing of concrete and ambition. I watched it from behind glass, a silent observer in my own expensive terrarium. The silence was the point, of course. I'd cultivated it, curated it, paid a premium for it. It was a silence so profound it had its own weight, pressing down on my shoulders day after day. My life was a series of quiet routines played out against a spectacular, indifferent backdrop. I wrote, I read, I ate food delivered in neat paper bags, and I watched the weather roll in over the Hudson. For a year, I had told myself this was peace. Lately, it had begun to feel like a cage. The problem, I decided with the kind of trivial focus that comes from having no real problems, was the windows. They were filthy. A year's worth of grime, salt, and city dust had conspired to create a translucent film, a cataract over the eye of my apartment. The vibrant panorama was muted, the sharp edges of the skyline softened into a dreary blur. It was a physical manifestation of how I felt, looking out at a life that was happening somewhere else, through a lens of my own accumulated neglect. It was an easy fix, a problem that money could solve, and so, for the first time in months, I did something. I went online and booked a window washing service. A company called Altitude, which felt both appropriate and vaguely terrifying. 2 days later, my buzzer rang. A voice, crackly and distorted through the intercom, announced their arrival. I let them up, my stomach doing a nervous little flip. It was the simple, stupid anxiety of letting strangers into my curated silence. 2 men appeared at my door, one older and wiry with a clipboard, the other younger, standing slightly behind him. The older one, Dave, did all the talking, explaining the process in a rapid-fire monotone. I nodded along, barely listening, because my attention had been completely snagged by the other man. He was quiet. He didn't offer a name, just a slow, deliberate nod in my direction. He was tall, with the kind of lean, corded strength that comes from physical labor, not a gym. His hair was a dark, unruly mess, and his eyes, when they briefly met mine, were a startlingly clear shade of gray, like a stormy sky right before the rain. He wore a simple, faded black t-shirt and canvas work pants stained with things I couldn't identify. There was a stillness about him, a solid presence that seemed to absorb the light in my stark, minimalist hallway. He looked at me for a fraction of a second too long, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze, before his attention shifted to the windows, his expression becoming purely professional. "We'll start on the outside," Dave said, already bustling toward the living room. "Reese will be on the rig. Just need you to make sure these windows are unlocked." Reese. The name suited him. It was short, solid, like a stone. He followed Dave, his movements economical and sure. He didn't look at me again. He was all business, checking the latches on the massive panes of glass that made up my western wall. I just stood there, feeling strangely out of place in my own home, an unnecessary piece of furniture. They worked quickly, prepping their gear. I retreated to my office, pretending to work, but all I could hear was the low murmur of their voices, the click and snap of carabiners, the soft thud of ropes on my hardwood floor. Then, silence. I waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. I crept out of my office and peered into the living room. It was empty. The balcony door was closed. For a moment, I thought they'd left. Then I saw it, a shadow falling over the room. I looked up, and my breath caught in my throat. There he was, Reese, suspended outside my window, 34 floors above the unforgiving pavement. He was a silhouette against the bright, hazy sky, held in place by a web of ropes and harnesses. He moved with a slow, hypnotic grace, a man completely at home in the abyss. He braced his feet against the building's facade, leaned back into the nothingness, and began to work. The first swipe of his squeegee was a clean, satisfying zip, cutting a perfectly clear swath through the grime. In that single motion, he let the light in, and I found that I couldn't look away. My day was a write-off. I abandoned any pretense of working and settled onto my sofa, a book open in my lap as a prop. My focus, however, was entirely outside. I became a student of the art of high-rise window washing. I watched the way Reese's muscles bunched in his shoulders and back as he pulled the squeegee in long, even strokes. I watched the methodical way he worked, top to bottom, left to right, a moving grid of cleanliness against the vast backdrop of the city. He was poetry in motion, a strange, beautiful dance between man, machine, and gravity. He seemed oblivious to my attention, lost in the rhythm of his work. His focus was absolute. He never looked down. He seemed to have an innate understanding of the space around him, of the precariousness of his position, yet he moved with an unnerving calm. It was more than just professional competence. It was a kind of peace. He was in his element, a place where most people would be paralyzed by terror. I, who was safe behind inches of tempered glass, felt a tremor of vertigo just watching him. Occasionally, he would pause, dipping his tools into the bucket that hung beside him, and in those moments, his focus would soften. He'd glance at the skyline, at the distant silhouette of the Statue of Liberty, at the ferries crawling across the harbor. It wasn't the look of a man admiring the view. It was the look of someone communing with it, a part of the vertical landscape. He belonged out there in a way I never felt I belonged in here. I started to notice the little things. The way he'd tuck a stray piece of hair behind his ear with the back of a gloved hand. The slight frown of concentration that creased his brow. The sheer physical power required to hold his body at that angle for hours on end. He was a puzzle I was trying to solve from a distance, through a slowly vanishing layer of dirt. Late in the afternoon, it happened. He was working on the last pane in my living room, the one directly in front of my sofa. He finished a stroke, paused to wipe his blade, and his eyes lifted. They moved past the reflection of the clouds, past the ghost of my own lamp in the glass, and found me. He caught me staring. My heart gave a painful thud against my ribs. I should have looked away, pretended I was reading, anything. But I was pinned by his gaze. Those clear gray eyes held mine for a long, silent moment. The city noise, the distant sirens, the hum of my own refrigerator, it all faded away. There was just the two of us, separated by a quarter-inch of glass and an impossible drop. A slow smile touched the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a smirk or a grin. It was a small, quiet, knowing thing. It was a smile that said, "I see you." Then he gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod and went back to work. My face burned. I snapped my book shut and fled to the kitchen, my pulse hammering in my ears. I felt utterly exposed, as if he hadn't just seen me looking, but had seen right through the glass, through my skin, and into the lonely, quiet core of me. I leaned against the counter, breathing deeply, my carefully constructed piece shattered. The silence of my apartment was no longer comforting. It was loud with unspoken things. The next day, I was a wreck of anticipation. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat by the window, waiting. It felt ridiculous, like a teenager waiting for a crush to walk by their locker. I was a grown man, a successful writer, and I was completely undone by a window washer. When his shadow finally fell across the floor, my stomach clenched with a mixture of dread and excitement. He started on my office windows. I tried to work, I really did. I stared at the blinking cursor on my screen, my fingers poised over the keyboard, but my mind was blank. All I was aware of was his presence on the other side of the wall, the faint, rhythmic zip-zip-zip of his squeegee. It was the most distracting sound I had ever heard. I gave up and swiveled my chair to face the window, surrendering to the obsession. Today, the sky was a deep, bruised purple in the east, threatening rain. The wind was stronger, and I could see it tugging at his clothes, whipping his dark hair across his face. He seemed unbothered, leaning into the wind as if it were an old friend. He moved with the same steady grace, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the extra firm set of his shoulders. The job was harder today, more dangerous, and my fascination was now laced with a sharp, unwelcome thread of anxiety. I found myself analyzing every detail, hoarding them like treasures. The faded tattoo of what looked like a bird's wing peeking out from the collar of his shirt. The way he bit his lower lip when concentrating on a stubborn spot. The sheer competence of his hands, gloved but still expressive in their sureness. He was a world unto himself out there, a self-contained universe of quiet capability. I was a spectator to his life, and the more I watched, the more I felt the thinness of my own. My life was about observing and describing. His was about doing, about existing in a state of heightened physical reality. My internal monologue was a constant, looping track of frantic analysis. Why had he smiled yesterday? Was it amusement? Pity? Was he just being friendly? Or was it something more? My mind, so adept at creating narratives for fictional characters, went into overdrive creating 100 different scenarios, 100 different meanings for that one small smile. I was building a story around him, around us, a fragile thing made of glass and glances. He finished the office and moved on to the bedroom. I didn't follow. That felt too intimate, too much like a violation of some unspoken boundary. Instead, I stayed at my desk, listening to the sounds of his work, my imagination painting a picture of him out there, framed by my bedroom window. The thought made a strange heat curl in my stomach. The company had estimated 2 days for the job. He was nearing the end. The final set of windows was a series of smaller panes in the dining area. As he moved to the last one, the wind picked up dramatically. The sky had gone from bruised to black, and the first drops of rain began to speckle the glass. I saw him brace himself, his whole body tensing against a particularly strong gust. The bucket at his side swung wildly, and he had to reach out to steady it. I stood up, my own anxiety making my hands feel cold. He should stop. It was getting too dangerous. I wanted to knock on the glass, to tell him to come in, but I was frozen. It wasn't my place. He was the professional. He knew what he was doing. He was trying to secure his equipment, preparing to call it a day. He unclipped his bucket, letting it hang from a secondary line, and reached for something on his harness. I saw him fumbling with a carabiner near his hip. Another gust of wind, stronger this time, slammed against the building. It sounded like a low moan. I saw Reese's body jerk, his feet slipping for a heart-stopping second before finding purchase again. He was talking to someone, his head tilted towards his shoulder where I assumed a radio was clipped. His movements were clipped, urgent. He was trying to get down, or up, or somewhere safe. He twisted his body, trying to get a better angle on the clip he was struggling with. It was jammed. I could see the frustration in the sharp, angry line of his jaw. He pulled at it, his knuckles white. Nothing. He looked over his shoulder, up towards the roof, then down at the street so far below. For the first time since I'd been watching him, I saw a flicker of something other than calm in his eyes. It wasn't panic. It was a cold, hard assessment of a bad situation. Then, his eyes met mine through the glass. This time there was no smile, no quiet knowing. It was a direct, raw appeal. He raised a hand and pointed towards the window latch. Then he pointed at himself. He was trapped, and the only way out was through my apartment. My paralysis broke. The world snapped back into sharp focus. I am on my feet, moving toward the window. My hands are shaking as I fumble with the lock. It's stiff from disuse. Come on, come on. The wind howls, and the rain is coming down in sheets now, smearing the glass, making him a blur. I finally get the lock to turn, and I push. The window swings inward with a gust of cold, wet air that fills the apartment with the smell of ozone and rain. Okay, I yell over the wind. It's open. He's already moving, unclipping lines with his free hand. His body is steady in controlled urgency. He swings himself closer to the opening, his movements precise despite the wind buffeting him. I need you to grab the belt, he shouts, his voice rough and immediate, cutting through the storm. Just guide me in. Easy. I reach out into the rain, my hands closing around the thick webbing of his harness. His body is solid, warm even through the wet fabric. The reality of him, the physical presence I've been observing from a distance, is suddenly right there, in my hands. I can feel the tension in his frame, the coiled strength. Got it, I say, my voice steadier than I feel. Okay, he breathes. On 3. Just pull me in. Easy, he expertly unclips the final safety line, and for a terrifying second, his entire weight is in my hands, his life tethered to me and the single rope still connected to the roof. He swings his legs inside, his boots thudding heavily onto my floor. Then he ducks his head and shoulders through, and he's in. He's inside my apartment. We stand there for a moment, dripping on my expensive rug, the wind and rain roaring through the open window. He leans forward and pulls the window shut, the sound of the storm instantly muffled to a distant drumming. The silence of the apartment rushes back in, but it's different now. It's charged electric. It's filled with the sound of our breathing. He's taller than I thought. Standing this close, he seems to fill the space. Water drips from his hair onto his face, tracing a path down his cheek. He pushes his wet hair back with a hand that is shaking, just slightly. The crack in his stoic facade. He's not a fearless god of the sky. He's a man who has just been in a very dangerous situation. Thanks, he says, his voice low and a little rough. He won't look at me. His gaze is fixed on the floor, on the puddle forming around his boots. Are you okay? The question is inadequate, stupidly small for the moment. He finally lifts his head, and his gray eyes meet mine. They're dark, turbulent. Yeah, he says, but the word doesn't sound convincing. The wind can be a real bastard up here. That clip. It's new. Supposed to be safer. I guess it's just stiff, he's explaining, rationalizing, more for himself than for me. You should sit down. I stammer, gesturing vaguely toward the sofa. Can I get you something? Water? A towel? He gives a short, sharp nod. A towel would be good. I hurry to the linen closet, my mind racing. He's in my apartment. Reese is in my apartment. My hands are still tingling from the feel of his harness. I grab the thickest towel I own and bring it back to him. He started to unbuckle his rig, the heavy gear clattering softly as he lays it on the floor. He takes the towel from me, and our fingers brush. A jolt, small but unmistakable, passes between us. It's the first time we've touched skin to skin. It feels like a brand. Thanks, he says again, his voice quieter this time. He scrubs the towel over his hair, his face, and for a moment, he looks younger, more vulnerable. The professional armor is gone, stripped away by the storm and the fear he won't admit to. He's just a man, standing in my living room, dripping water and adrenaline. The rain continues to beat against the glass, a relentless rhythm that seems to be counting down to something. He's finished with the towel, but he doesn't move. He doesn't make any indication that he's going to leave. He just stands there, holding the damp towel, looking at me. The professional boundary has not just been crossed, it has been obliterated. And in its place is a tension so thick I feel like I could choke on it. He's waiting for something. I just don't know what it is. My partner will have pulled the rig up to the roof, he says, breaking the silence. His voice is a low rumble that seems to vibrate in the air between us. He'll call when it's secure. Okay, my own voice is a whisper. I clear my throat. So you just wait here. Yeah. He finally moves, taking a step away from the puddle on the floor and walking over to the window. He places a hand on the glass, right over a spot he'd cleaned just an hour before. He looks out at the storm-lashed city, a landscape he had just been a part of. You've got a great view. It's why I took the place. I reply, my words feeling clumsy and rehearsed. Small talk. We were making small talk after he almost fell 34 stories. The absurdity of it is almost laughable. He turns his head, not his whole body, just his head, and looks at me over his shoulder. Do you live here alone? The question hangs in the air, simple on the surface, but loaded with 1,000 other questions I can feel, but not name. It's too personal for a stranger, for a window washer. But he isn't a stranger, not anymore. I've spent 2 days watching him, studying him, and he just swung into my life from the sky. Yes, I say. The word feels heavy, a confession. Just me. He nods slowly, his gaze drifting around the room, taking in the sparse furniture, the carefully chosen art, the stacks of books. His eyes are perceptive, intelligent. He's not just looking, he's reading the room. He's reading me. His gaze settles on a painting on the far wall, a chaotic, abstract piece I'd done myself years ago, full of angry blues and desperate yellows. Is that yours? He asks. I'm taken aback. What? The painting, he points with his chin. Did you paint it? Yeah. A long time ago. It's loud, he says, and it's the perfect word for it. Not good, not bad, just loud. He turns back to the window, but I feel like he's still looking at me, at the loud, messy parts of me that I try to keep hidden beneath all this quiet. His phone buzzes in his pocket. He pulls it out, reads a text, and types a quick reply. That was Dave, he says, slipping the phone away. Rig secure. He's heading down. I should go. Relief and disappointment war within me. It's a dizzying combination. Of course he should go. The danger is over. The transaction is complete. But I don't want him to. I want him to stay in the charged silence of my apartment forever. He picks up his harness, the metal clips jingling like wind chimes. He slings it over his shoulder and walks toward the door. I follow him, my feet feeling like lead. At the door, he stops and turns to face me. We're close again, close enough for me to smell the rain on his clothes and the clean, sharp scent of the wind that clings to him. It's the scent of the world outside my window. Seriously, he says, his gray eyes intense. Thank you. You were really calm. I let out a short, choked laugh. I was not calm. I was terrified. A ghost of that smile touches his lips again. Well, you hit it well. Thanks, Elias. He knows my name. Of course he knows my name. It was on the work order. But hearing him say it feels different. It feels personal. It feels like he's known it all along. He reaches for the doorknob, and my mind screams. Don't let him leave. Say something. Do something. But I am a creature of inaction. I am the observer behind the glass. I just stand there, mute. He opens the door. He's halfway out into the hallway. And then he stops. He turns back, his body still angled to leave, but his head turned towards me. He looks at me, a long, searching look that strips me bare. The air crackles. The space between us is a live wire. This is it. The moment hangs, suspended, just like he was outside my window. He can either leave, and this will become a strange story I tell myself at night, or he can stay, and everything will change. He takes a step back inside. He lets the door click shut behind him, sealing us back inside my quiet world. He drops his harness to the floor with a heavy thud. My heart is not beating. It has stopped. The world has stopped. I saw you watching me, he says. His voice is quiet, a statement of fact, not an accusation. Yesterday, and today, I can't breathe. I can't speak. I can only nod, a tiny, jerky movement. He takes another step, closing the remaining distance between us. He's so close now. I have to tilt my head back to look up at him. His eyes are searching mine, looking for something. Permission? An answer? A sign that he's not misreading this fragile, unspoken thing that has been building between us for 2 days. I start, but I don't know what to say. I think you're beautiful. I think I'm falling in love with a man I've never spoken to. I haven't felt this alive in years. He lifts a hand, slowly, as if not to spook a wild animal. His fingers are rough, his knuckles calloused. He gently, so gently, touches my cheek. His hand is cold from the rain, but his touch is electric, sending a shockwave through my entire body. I flinch, not away from him, but into the touch. My eyes flutter shut. Elias, he whispers, and my name is a prayer on his lips. And then he leans down, and he kisses me. It is not a hard, demanding kiss. It is soft. It is questioning. It is the end of a long, silent conversation. His lips are chapped and cool from the wind, but they are incredibly gentle against mine. It's a kiss of profound relief, the release of 2 days of unbearable, unspoken tension. I feel a sound escape my throat, a half sob, half sigh, and I lean into him, my hands coming up to grip his shirt, bunching the damp fabric in my fists as if he might disappear. He responds to my touch, his other hand coming up to cup the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair. The kiss deepens, becomes more sure, more certain. It's not rushed. It feels like coming home to a place I've never been. It tastes of rain and sky and a longing so deep it aches. All the loneliness, all the quiet observation, all the yearning I'd locked away inside my chest for years, it all melts away in the warmth of his mouth. This is not a story I'm writing. This is real. This man, this stranger who fell out of the sky and into my life, is kissing me in my hallway, and I am kissing him back. For the first time, I am not behind the glass. I am in the world. I am part of the storm. When he finally pulls back, we're both breathless. He rests his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. I can feel the slight tremor that still runs through his body. We just stand there, breathing each other's air, the only sound the soft drumming of the rain against the windows he had so carefully cleaned. I should have fallen a lot sooner, he murmurs against my skin, and the words, so absurd and so perfect, make me laugh. It's a real laugh, rusty from disuse, but it's real. He opens his eyes, and the gray is no longer stormy. It's clear, calm, and it's full of a light that has nothing to do with the sky outside. It's a light that is all his own, and it's shining right at me. He didn't stay the night. After the kiss, after a few more stolen, breathless moments where we just looked at each other, trying to comprehend what had just happened, reality began to seep back in. His phone buzzed again. Dave was waiting downstairs. The job was over. I have to go, he said, and the words were a physical blow. He pulled away, and the space he left was instantly cold. Okay, I said, my voice small. I tried to keep my expression neutral, to hide the sudden, panicked fear that this was it. A single, perfect, storm-induced moment that would now be over. He picked up his harness, his movements slow, reluctant. At the door, he paused again, just as he had before. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Was he going to say it was a mistake? Was he going to apologize? I'll be back tomorrow, he said, to finish the last few panes, the small ones by the kitchen. Relief washed over me so intensely my knees felt weak. Tomorrow, I repeated, the word tasting like hope. He nodded, a ghost of a smile on his lips. Tomorrow, and then he was gone. The door clicked shut, and I was alone again. But the silence was different. It wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the echo of his voice, the memory of his touch, the phantom taste of rain on his lips. I went to the window and watched until I saw their van pull away from the curb, a small white rectangle disappearing into the rain-slicked streets. I didn't sleep that night. I paced my apartment, replaying every moment, every glance, every word. I analyzed the kiss from every possible angle, dissecting it with the obsessive precision of a critic. Was it real? Did it mean what I thought it meant? Or was it just an adrenaline-fueled reaction to a near-death experience? My mind, my worst enemy, spun out a dozen scenarios where he would come back tomorrow and pretend it never happened. Where he would be polite, professional, and distant, leaving me with nothing but the memory and a crushing sense of my own foolishness. The fear was a cold, heavy knot in my stomach. The next morning, I was a bundle of raw nerves. I showered and dressed with more care than I had in years. I cleaned the apartment, pointlessly wiping down already clean surfaces. I made coffee I was too anxious to drink. I was trying to impose order on my space as a way of controlling the chaos in my head. I sat on the sofa, waiting, watching the clock. The minutes crawled by. 9 o'clock came and went. Then 10. My hope began to curdle into a familiar, sour dread. He wasn't coming. It was a mistake. I had imagined it all. I was just the lonely man in the glass tower, projecting fantasies onto the handsome window washer. The thought was so painful, so humiliating, I almost wished he wouldn't come. It would be easier than facing the polite rejection. At 10:30, my buzzer rang. My heart leaped into my throat. I pressed the talk button, my hand trembling. Hello. It's Reese. His voice came, clear and steady through the speaker. From altitude. Here to finish up. His tone was professional, businesslike. The knot in my stomach tightened. I buzzed him in, my mind racing. Act normal. Be casual. Don't let him see how much this means to you. When I opened the door, he was standing there, but he was alone. No Dave. He wore a clean shirt and the same work pants. He wasn't carrying any of his gear. Hi, he said. He wasn't smiling. His expression was serious, his gray eyes searching mine. The air between us was thick with awkwardness. Hi, I croaked back. I thought you were. Finishing the windows. I called in, he said, his gaze unwavering. Told them the wind was still too high, which is a lie. It's a perfect day. My brain struggled to process this. Oh, can I come in, he asked. I stepped back, holding the door open, and he walked inside. He stopped in the entryway, turning to face me. The silence stretched, thin and fragile. My carefully constructed casualness was evaporating with every second that passed. Look, he started, running a hand through his damp hair. About yesterday. Here it comes. The apology. The let's just forget this happened. I braced myself. I shouldn't have just left like that, he said, and it was not at all what I was expecting. And I shouldn't have kissed you and then just walked out the door. That was not right. My head was a mess. I stared at him, speechless. He took a small step closer. I woke up this morning, and my first thought was that I had dreamed it. That whole thing. The storm us. He looked at me, his vulnerability a raw, open thing. It wasn't a dream, was it? No. I whispered, finding my voice. It wasn't a dream. A slow wave of relief washed over his face, softening the hard lines around his eyes. Good, he breathed. That's good, he paused, then said. Last night wasn't a mistake, Elias. Not for me. I just needed to come back and make sure you felt the same way. He was giving me an out. He was standing in my doorway, his heart on his sleeve, and giving me the chance to walk away, to say it was just the storm, just the adrenaline. The test. It wasn't about whether he would reject me. It was about whether I would reject him or myself. Could I accept this? Could I step out from behind the glass? All my fear, all my overthinking, all my carefully constructed walls seemed so flimsy, so pointless in the face of his quiet, terrifying honesty. I had a choice. I could retreat into my silence, or I could meet his bravery with my own. I closed the door. Then I stepped forward, reached out, and took his hand. His fingers, calloused and strong, laced with mine. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like a vow. It felt like an answer. It wasn't a mistake for me, either, I said, and my voice was clear and steady. The smile that broke across his face was like the sun breaking through the clouds. It lit up his entire being, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. He squeezed my hand, a silent reassurance that this was real, that we were real. The job was over. The professional pretense was gone. There was no reason for him to be here, except that he wanted to be. And I wanted him here. That was the only thing that mattered. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. The words felt secondary to the quiet understanding that had settled between us. I made coffee, and this time I could drink it. He sat on my sofa, the one where I had spent 2 days watching him, and he looked completely at home. He didn't seem overwhelmed by the height or the view. He seemed a part of it. I sat down next to him, not too close, but not too far away. The awkwardness was gone, replaced by a comfortable, humming silence. He drank his coffee, his eyes roaming my apartment again, but this time it felt different. It wasn't an assessment, it was a quiet curiosity. "So," he said, setting his mug down. "A writer?" "Yeah," I said. "And you're a vertical maintenance engineer?" I teased, using the term from the company's website. He chuckled, a low, warm sound. "You can just call me a window washer." "It's what I am." He looked at me. "Is it any good? The writing?" "It pays the bills," I said with a shrug. "It's lonely work." "I get that," he said, surprising me. "It's different, but I get it. Up there," he gestured toward the window. "It's just me and the sky. You're alone, but you're not. You're part of this huge thing. It's hard to explain." "No," I said, looking from him to the skyline. "I think I understand." He stayed for hours. We talked. We talked about everything and nothing. About the books on my shelves and the tattoo on his arm. It was a peregrine falcon. About his childhood in a small town upstate and my childhood in a crowded city suburb. We were filling in the gaps, coloring in the sketches we had made of each other from a distance. With every story, every shared laugh, the fragile connection between us solidified, becoming something strong and tangible. Late in the afternoon, as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the floor, a comfortable lull fell between us. He was leaning back against the sofa cushions, his arm resting along the back, his fingers just inches from my shoulder. The urge to lean into him, to close that small gap, was overwhelming. He seemed to sense it. He turned his head and looked at me, his expression soft. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. I was thinking about how strange it was that the safest I had ever felt was with a man whose job was to defy death every day. I was thinking about how his presence had made my silent, empty apartment feel like a home for the first time. I was thinking that I didn't want him to leave. "I'm thinking," I said, my voice quiet, "that my windows have never been cleaner." He smiled, a slow, knowing smile. Yeah, I said. "It's like I can see everything clearly now." My gaze dropped to his lips, and his eyes followed mine. The air grew thick again, charged with the same electricity as the day before. But this time, there was no fear, no uncertainty. Only a quiet, thrilling anticipation. He closed the gap. He leaned in and kissed me again. This kiss was different from the first. It was not born of adrenaline and relief. It was slow, deliberate, and deeply tender. It was a kiss that promised a beginning, not just a moment. It was a conscious choice, a quiet affirmation of everything we had discovered about each other in the span of a few hours. When we parted, he didn't pull away completely. He rested his hand on my shoulder, his thumb stroking the fabric of my shirt. We sat there, watching the sky outside the window burst into a fiery palette of orange and pink. The city lights began to flicker on, one by one, a million tiny stars waking up. For so long, That view had been a reminder of my isolation, a beautiful spectacle that I was separate from. But now, sitting beside Reese, his warmth a solid presence next to me, I felt a part of it. The glass was no longer a barrier. It was just a window. And on the other side wasn't a world I was excluded from, but a future I was finally ready to step into. I looked at him, at the way the sunset painted gold across his face, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that my life of quiet observation was over. The silence had been broken. The light had been let in. I was no longer alone in my tower. I had come home,